Hello, Alwyn. You are up last, sir.
Hey Bart, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Where are you playing out of, Alwyn?
This is out of a small little card room in Gardena, California called Hustler. Have you heard of it?
I have. Hustler. By the way, too. So, what's the latest in the games at? I was always amazed too, like with Hustler Casino Live. They don't really get a whole lot of large no limit games there, right? On a regular basis.
It depends on what you'd call large. I guess 5510 is fairly consistent. I think that
Five five ten is fairly
every
okay.
day.
Okay. Oh, it's going off every day. Okay.
Yeah,
So you probably see
most days.
you probably see one of our instructors, Peter, stay in school. I don't know if you know who that is in there, because I know he grinds that game quite a bit. I have Charlie, who hosts Third Man Walking, probably
Probably
plays in that.
once,
Yep,
a
as
couple
well.
times there. Yeah.
So is this 5510 or is this just 55?
This is 5510. The $10 saddle is on. Yes.
So what's the cap in this game? Is it 2000?
I believe it's 1500 if I'm not mistaken. It's actually been a couple months since I played it.
So 5510, so it's a three blind structure, right?
Correct.
A fixed three blind structure. I really like that. I feel like that most live no limit games should go to a three blind structure. I mean, it's hard to do the ante thing because I think it slows the game down. Even though most no limit games probably should be, they're all supposed to be played with antes. Actually, any no limit game is supposed to be played with an ante. But I think it's very easy to just like make it three blinds, even at the low stakes. So what? Why can't you make it like 1, 2, 3? You know, just adds a little bit more action to the game. But 5, 5, 10, 1500 buy-in. And what's the effective stacks here?
The effective stack will be the villain with 3400.
Oh, so you guys are deep.
We are deep. Yes,
Oh,
this is a little bit of context. This is towards the end of the night, and on that note, actually, as this hand is being dealt, two people actually state that this is going to be their last hand and they're leaving, which would make it four-handed.
so you think the game might break right after this?
That's correct. In fact, as the flop is being dealt, a little spoiler, as the flop is being dealt, one other player then says, "I don't want to play short-handed," and he grabs a rack to leave, which then creates a three-handed situation. And both the villain and I know that this is pretty much the very last hand of the game.
So the reason why you might be bringing that up, Alan, is because some people might not want to lose all of their money, right, when the game's about to break, I would assume.
Yep.
Or possibly make some sort of crazy move when they know if they're wrong, now all of a sudden they're stuck and they can't get it back, right? I would assume.
Yep.
Okay. All right, start us off here.
Okay. So 5-5-10
Uh-huh.
pre-flop. I am in the big blind with ace of diamonds, two of diamonds.
And you say, so it's six-handed right now, is that right?
It is six-handed, and yes, six-handed. Two people are already wrapped up and ready to leave, and one is about to.
So you're in the middle blind for 5 at 5, 5, 10 with ace deuce of diamond.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Mhm.
Cutoff opens for $35.
Okay.
The small blind, who is not a great player, is a calling station. He calls.
Okay.
I then three bet to 170.
I was gonna say, I mean, I would three bet this here. So you three bet to 170. I mean, it's you're dealing with almost like free money in the small blind, right? I mean, somewhat. I mean, I guess if it's six-handed, you could call it middle. You got a cutoff open at 35. A small blind calls, and you've got a suited ace. Now, granted, it's like the worst suited ace, but even still, it's such a profitable spot if you can get through the first guy, even if the small blind like flats behind you. I mean, I think you can be doing this with, I would probably do this with any suited Broadway, maybe like sixes plus, direct suited connectors with playability. This might be like one of the spots where I might be a little bit I don't know if you want to say the widest, but I'm taking all of those hands that are partial three bets and I'm three betting them here when it goes open call.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Additionally, my image is actually really good at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually haven't really lost any major hands, and everything I've shown down has been the nuts or near nuts. So I have a very good image, which I know is one of your criteria for when to three bet and when to play more aggressive.
Yeah, in terms of your yes, godlike image. In terms of your people just want to stay away from you. You win a lot of non-shown down hands, which is great. So in terms of your sizing, what's 4x times 35 is what, 140. So you went like 4x plus the call, right? Ish.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So hero goes to 170. Okay.
Only the cutoff calls. The small blind folds.
All right. So the cutoff calls and the small blind folds. And what's the deal with the cutoff?
The cutoff is fairly competent. He seems to be maybe not quite a pro, but at least relatively competent. a little extra dynamics involving him. He's currently up big for the session. I think he's up about 2K.
Okay.
Because I was there when the game started and now I'm here when the game ends. So he's up about 2K. So he has not shown any like bluffs or any major mistakes in my opinion. So that's partially part of the dynamics.
So you get this dynamics where you and him both know this is going to be basically the last hand. This guy's also up, which again, a lot of people might want to lock it up, or they don't necessarily want to risk a bunch of profit knowing the game's going to break. So those things are coming into play. All right, so 375, right, to the flop.
375 to flop.
Yep.
The flop is 6 of diamonds, 4 of diamonds, 2 of spades.
6 of diamonds, 4 of diamonds, 2 of spades. So you flop the nut flush draw with a pair. With a pair. That's interesting. So, you know, these boards, people look at that, like this is not 6, 7, 8. This is not as connected as one would seem, in the sense of like, there really shouldn't be 2 pair here, and there shouldn't be 5-3. So you don't have those types of holdings. So depending on what you want to do here, like this is a board where I would start c-bet bluffing with a lot of my holdings. And I guess you don't, I mean, and I think the theory goes that it's kind of a small bet, it's a small board. You can start to go large. Now, with that being said, if you wanted to check some hands, you might have one of these hands that you can sort of disguise in the form of having ace deuce of diamonds, in the sense that you've got the nut flush draw and you have a pair. Like you betting here, if you start to take a really large sizing on the flop, I'm not sure if you can necessarily get called by worse here if you start to take a large sizing on the flop, because you have ace deuce. So if you start going super large, I mean, you also have the ace of diamonds in your hand, which is on the front door side. So I don't know, like ace queen with the queen of diamonds, maybe that's like appeal, but it's kind of a little bit in between. So I don't know if I might want to take a small size or sometimes check here too. That's sort of my thinking. You're also building a pot up towards the nuts as well. I mean, I don't hate it, obviously betting and getting called.
Yeah, that was definitely something I was thinking about. This is a fairly low board. If he has any pocket pairs, they're probably going to be fairly high, like 7s, 8s, 9s, for example. And they're going to call down. And if I'm drawing to the nuts, for example, I do want to be able to start building up that pot to potentially stack off against him. Also, since I am drawing to the nuts, that is something that I should be able to identify whether or not I'm ahead or not.
Now, but by the way, if you do start to take a larger size bet too, I kind of washed over this, I would absolutely like to triple off on the right types of runouts here. It's kind of like you've got the best of both worlds where you actually have a draw and you can triple off. Because again, if you take a larger sizing here and get called, I don't really think that there's any way that you're ahead right now, like right now on the flop. So, you have to take that into consideration.
Yeah, I think that's true. Also, because I 3-bet, there is the possibility of my range also consists of overpairs.
Sure.
Which could do that.
Yeah. Okay. So what did you do?
So on the flop, I bet 250, so fairly large, about 2/3 sizing. And he calls.
So here bets 250. And the cutoff call. So you went 2/3. You didn't go crazy. Pot is 875. Somebody chimed in the live chat. What about backdoor Broadway types of holdings? Like what? King, jack of spades. I don't know. I mean, to 250 here, like king high and queen high on 6-4 deuce, when you're behind to ace high, it's not like there's a 9 on the board where you can turn straightening equity. Like if the guy's got like king, jack of spades, king, 10 of spades, like this isn't the board where he can pick up that equity, as opposed to it being like 9-4 deuce or something like that. I think those get folded out quite a bit, being behind to ace high. So now the pot's 875.
Correct.
Yep.
The turn comes the 4 of hearts.
4 of hearts.
Which is one of those cards that would slow me down a bit, since if he has overpairs, he's still not going to fold. So I don't want to inflate the pot anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, my draw hasn't completed yet. So I do end up checking here.
So hero checks. I mean, What would you do? Would this card slow you down if you had an overpair?
Sometimes, if depending on what type of overpair, if it's a non-vulnerable overpair, for example, like aces, kings, queens, where I think I'm likely going to be ahead no matter what on a river, I probably would keep betting. If it's something closer to like nines or tens, where there is the possibility of him having potentially tens or something higher, I might check just to pot control.
See, I think that like when you start a bet like this on the flop, and we were talking about like running this barrel with this type of equity, that this is a good card for you. I mean, sure, you don't necessarily expect sevens through jacks to fold right now. And this is why you don't have to necessarily go pot sizing. You can go like, size down a little bit to maybe, I don't know if it would be like half to 2/3 and then follow up on the river. But I just kind of feel like if I want to credibly represent, like I do have aces, kings, or queens, I don't think this card would slow me down if I had aces, kings, and queens. I mean, the guy's calling your 3-bet squeeze with the small blind having already called behind. And how that affects things is that the higher over pairs, I think, are incentivized to 4-bet from him. Like maybe even down to sometimes like tens and jacks to drive the small blind out. Not always, but he's going to be 4-betting more often here than he would if it was just purely heads up. And then I'm like, does he have a hand with a 4 in it all that often here that gets defended? I mean, maybe 2 combos of like ace-4 suited, I suppose maybe like 5-4, but again, you've got another guy in there. I just don't think the 4, I mean, obviously a deuce would have been a better card for you, but this card doesn't, a deuce would have been a better card for you because you would have had trips, but I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about like texture wise to run a bluff or better for an overpair. So I think I would continue to bet here, but you decided to check. Okay.
Yes. I think what you're saying is fair.
Yeah.
The only thing I would potentially add is, since the small blind is not a great player, there is a small chance that he may flat even with good cards to try and keep, for all intents and purposes, a fish in the hand. But I think generally you're probably right that he would 4-bet an overpair.
And the other thing too that's kind of interesting about this is that, like, if you check here, if you check and the guy bets, right? I assume like the only option here is to check call. And the problem is that now by checking here on the turn, you've almost given up the opportunity to like credibly like run to win the hand without showdown on a bluff at the end. Whereas if you continued with the lead, because say you check and he bets and you call, and now the river is like a queen or a jack, or even, God forbid, even a king, and you check the river and he checks behind and he wins with like 8s or 9s. You haven't been able to put him in a blender by continuing with the lead here on the turn and then triple barreling at the end, right?
I think that's fair. Another reason why I checked was based on whether or not he bet, and the bet sizing could tell me a lot about what kind of hand he had. For example, if he was also on a flush draw, there's a relatively decent chance he may check back to try and realize his equity. If he has a vulnerable pair like 9s, 10s, so on and so forth, he may bet a little larger, so on and so forth. So part of that was using the bet sizing to kind of understand where his hand strength was.
Well, yeah, but what if he bets like 350? Like, are you saying that you might check raise the turn?
No, I wasn't planning on that.
I mean, if he bets 350, like he could, that's the problem. He could still have like 8s, I mean, he's making like a protection bet, something like that. But you check, and what does he do?
He bets 300.
Okay, how about 300? So the cutoff bet's 300. And again, this is what my concern here is that, it's a weird one. Just like, I'm going to suddenly, if you're never going to play overpairs this way on the turn, it's kind of a little bit weird one to check raise turn. But now it's just, you've taken that line of being able to go bet, bet, bet. Now you're going to call. And then, I mean, okay, so let's say you call. What are you ever donking the river when you don't improve?
Depends on the river.
Like, what if the river's like an offsuit queen or king? See how kind of it's kind of strange?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't donk unless I had a pretty decent hand.
So you'd have to make something. Right. So now by check calling turn, now you've basically given up the ability to win without showdown, if you see what I'm saying.
I do see that.
The other interesting part here is, so you call, right? Cutoff bet's 300, you call?
I do.
All right, so hero calls. So the pot now is 1475. And another interesting thing here too is that, and I don't remember what the river here is that what happens if the river is an offsuit ace? I mean, obviously, if it's what happens? Let's go through two different scenarios. Let's actually start with offsuit deuce. What would you do if the river was an offsuit deuce?
So I would make a full house, but bottom full house.
Right.
I would, given I'm in position, I would probably take one of two paths.
You're out of position, right? You're out of position.
I'm out of position.
Yeah,
Sorry, that's
yeah.
what I meant. I'd probably take one of two different paths. One is probably bet relatively small and hopefully induce a raise, and then I would just call that off, or I would do a check call, given that a lot of the draws do miss with the two.
I don't know, man. I mean, I don't know if I would. I mean, you're the one that has the diamond draw. The problem here too at the end with checking I mean, I understand that you're it's just like the whole line with him betting 300. It just seems like he's got 8s or 9s. River's a deuce. It's just going to go check. You know what I mean? Quite a bit. So there's that. How about if, and then again, you're the one that has the draw. So I don't know how many draws here are really missing. I mean, yeah, okay, like king, jack of diamonds, king, 10 of diamonds. You've got ace, deuce, diamonds in your hand. What if the river is an ace?
If the river's an ace,
like the ace of clubs.
Yeah, I would probably lead on that card as well. I'm trying to think sizing wise. I would probably lead relatively small and hope for a crying call from pairs like 7s through jacks or
yeah. I mean, I think that I would probably, if I played it this way, I think I would probably lead on both of those cards. The deuce is quite interesting because of the fact that you could put yourself in a situation against a good player where he puts a lot of pressure on you, thinking that you never have 6s the way that this is played out, and you very rarely have a 4, and I do. So I'm going to put a bunch of pressure on you. Again, the great thing about live poker is sometimes we don't need to worry about that. I suppose you can make the same case with an ace where you could open yourself up to being in a very tough situation if you get raised, if you make any of those hands and then you lead. Again, with that being said, though, the pot starts to get big. You've got all this other dynamic stuff in there. It's just the frequency of getting bluffed is kind of small. And I mean, and I suppose you could say the same thing. I mean, I was talking about a deuce or an ace coming. How about if a diamond comes? By the way, what is the river?
The river is indeed a diamond. It is the 3 of diamonds.
Okay. So so it's the 3 of diamonds, and it also puts out a one-liner now to a 5 because it's 6-4 deuce 4-3. So do you agree with me that hands like 7s through jacks are basically going to check back if you check, unless somehow they're turning it into a bluff?
Yes, I do think a lot of hands are going to be checking here.
Right. So now the question here becomes, well, I made my hand. I guess it's kind of sort of very similar to the deuce and the ace coming. Maybe you put out, but the other thing though too is that now someone 7s through 10s and jacks, they can't even beat a 5 here. And a 5 was a wheel draw. Ace, if you had 3-bet with ace 5, they can't even beat a 5. Because it's 6-4 deuce 4-3. So if the guy's got 9s, he can't beat diamonds. He can't beat a 5. So that might make you even sort of want to block size down more to 400, 500, depending on what you're trying to target here. It's definitely. I don't think it's a card that you can bet large on. That's for sure.
I think your reasoning is fairly correct. Unfortunately, at the time, I was thinking I like where I'm at, but there are some potential hands that might beat me, like 6s, which I didn't think was that likely, 6-4, and so on and so forth. And just in case, I led with a sizing that would be fairly large with the intention where it seemed like I had no fold equity. My hope was that if he did jam, he would know that it's not going to get through because if you're bluffing, I don't have that much fold equity. So it'd make his bluff significantly lower. So I did bet fairly large.
How much did you bet?
I bet 1,100.
Yeah, so here's the thing. We'll get to the second part that you just talked about here in a second. But my question to you is, what are you trying to get called by here by betting 1,100? If do you think that sevens through jacks is going to call 1,100 here when the front door diamonds come in and it's a one-liner out here? Because I think that this card on the river, it's not just any diamond. It's the fact that it puts a one-liner out here to a straight, and people love to 3-bet ace-5 quite a bit, forces you to almost size smaller than this. What are you trying to get called by here?
Actually, I'm not trying to get called by pairs anymore now that I've hit. I don't think pairs are going to call most sizes. I wanted to be called by those specific lower flushes or by that one-liner to straight. If somehow he has 5-7 as well, that's an even higher straight that could be calling. Those are hands that I was hoping to get called by.
So you're trying to target a 5 or a lower flush for the most part.
Correct. And in my opinion, I didn't think that those hands would be able to re-raise, given that, one, I blocked the nut flush, and I also block some of the full houses. So I didn't think he was going to be re-raising without a very, very strong hand, like a full house.
Well, right. And for the most part, I do that's another technique that you can use in live poker is, you're betting to get the most amount of value, and it also decreases your bluffing frequency, which will sometimes allow you to sort of bet fold to aggression more easily. I mean, if you get aggression here, this one's going to be kind of brutal because, the pot's going to be really, really large and you guys aren't going to have that much behind. It makes sense what you're saying. I guess I can get on board with the fact that if you're only targeting like a 5 or smaller flushes, but again, though, you have, you basically block a lot of the combos, though, of flushes because you have the ace of diamonds. So, how many flushes really are there? And then, sure, like he might bet flush draws on the turn. And then of the hands that he's got that have 5s in it, would he bet 300? I suppose. I just wonder if you can still get like a what the fuck type of call from everything else in his range that are over pairs by betting like 400 or 500 or something like that. But you took the larger sizing, so you go 1,100. Okay.
He thinks for about 5 seconds, and then he jams for his entire stack, which is 2680 total.
So cutoff jams for 2680 total. So let's do some math here. So 2575. So just about 26 plus about 27. So it's like 5250, 1680 for you to call, something like that?
Yes, that's what I have.
1600 to call. So you are getting over 3-1. 6 of diamonds, 4 of diamonds, deuce of spades, turns the 4 of hearts, rivers the 3 of diamonds, hero with ace, deuce of diamonds. 3-bet pre as a squeeze, took a 2/3 sizing on the flop, got called, checked, talked about the turn quite a bit. We checked the turn on a 4, called 300, and then the river makes the diamonds on a 1-liner to a 5, bets 1,100, and the cutoff jams for 3250. You have a deuce in your hand that blocks pocket deuces. If he's not playing 6-4 suited, by the way, there's 2 combos of 6-4 suited, so you would be losing to what? Pocket 6s, 3 combos of pocket 6s, 1 combo of quad 4s, 1 combo of pocket deuces because you have a deuce in your hand, and then I suppose he could have pocket 3s here too, because 3s is a gut shot on the flop, and then he's just betting for protection on the turn. So he's got some of these hands in here. Yeah, from a theoretical perspective, I'm sure you're supposed to have some hands to call with. Here's the thing. If you're not really 3-betting like pocket 4s and pocket 6s in this scenario, then you have to call with something. So the answer would be, well, nut flushes would be there, right? The reality of it, it's, it would be a fairly exploitable fold that might be correct, I would say, in live poker. I personally might flick in the call. Curtis Hustler says, I'm not folding this combo at Commerce. Nate says, is this dude up big? Yes, he's up 2,000. Also, as Alwyn said, everyone knows this is the last hand of the night because the game's about to break, which I'm sure Alwyn has taken that into consideration. So those things all lean towards, we should overfold this spot. He's up big. The game's about to break. And that would make him probably bluff less. We are getting just about 3.5 to 1 here. And the other thing too is that, like, is there any hand here? I always go back to this too. Is there any possible hand here that ever raises all in that's worse for value? So Alwyn's got ace deuce of diamonds on 6-4, deuce 4-3. There's a one-liner out there to a 5. So would the king high flush here ever raise all in for value? If I can ever conclude that I can find possibilities that anybody would raise hands for value that are worse, then I would call. The interesting part of this one is that, is it possible that you could be betting a 5 here at the end? And if I've got the king high flush in your opponent's hand, if I'm your opponent and I have the king high flush, and I just don't think that you really have any boats here, and you might have a 5, and it seems to me kind of strange the way that you played it, like if you had the nut flush draw because you didn't barrel turn, maybe I would. It's not that big of a jam. It's only like, 2.5x? And then we get into situations where it's like reverse pot odds, where I'm like, you can jam lighter. Like your opponent can jam lighter here because of reverse pot odds. And what I mean by that is that you're getting a better price. He just doesn't have that much because it went from 1,100 to say 26. So, you're always going to be getting over 3 to 1. So I don't know. I mean, you wonder if he might jam here with something that's weaker. If we say, no, he's never jamming, that's fine too. But yeah, this is a pickle. What did you end up doing?
I tanked folded for probably the longest time in my life. And since this was the very last hand, nobody called clock. And the dealer, I felt bad, was kind of going into the next shift. Eventually, after like 5 minutes, I ended up folding. And as we were racking up, I said, would you mind telling me what you had? And he actually flipped over and showed 7-6 of spades.
7-6 of spades. Oh, wow. So he turned his 6 into a bluff. Is that right?
Yes.
My God. Oh, Alwyn.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he knew that you knew that the game was going to break. And he knew that you knew that he was up. And he took that all into consideration.
That was a lot of the dynamics at play.
Wow. Yeah, man, that's why I kind of felt like I would just kind of flick in the call with the nut flush. But I mean, I don't think anybody can. I mean, we were sort of 50-50 in the live chat, but I appreciate you calling that one in. Thank you very much, sir.